Tonight, we're here to celebrate Morton Marcus's marvelous collection with his gorgeous cover, Moments Without Names, New and Selected Prose Poems. Most of you already know that Morton taught at Cabrillo College in film and literature for a very long time. He's now retired. And I wanted to read a couple of comments from other people than myself about Morton's work. Al Young says, Morton Marcus, one of America's hidden literary treasures, has become a superb master of the prose poem. Often it's the situation, the little storyline that captivates, the unimaginably tantalizing mini-stories, thumbnails, histories, legends, pictures, myths, sketches, murals, and musicals. At other times it is language, the physically affecting beauty of it, that sends a shiver up the spine. I couldn't get enough of this delectable stuff, and there is nothing like it anywhere. Would you please welcome Morton Marcus.
Barry White stole my voice. Thank you all for coming. I wasn't kidding. Thank you all for coming, and we will get through this together. I do appreciate you being here. So many friends I've known, some I haven't seen in years, and so many of you I don't know. Tonight I'm going to read from this book. How's my voice sound? Can you understand the words? Good. Barry White. Maybe I ought to start to sing this. I don't know. It sounds like what?
Louis Armstrong.
That's not bad either. I'm going to read around 12 poems from the book, which will illustrate the different moods and the different subjects that the book is in. But first, I think I ought to introduce myself. As you know, Mort has a very definite meaning. It means death in French. What's in a name? My family thinks I'm a pessimist. There he goes again, my wife and daughter say, rolling their eyes when I mention an airline crash or predict the end of the Republic. It's been going on a long time, and I'm sure it's because of my name. Morbid, my mother would say so often when I was a boy. You're morbid. That I thought she was teaching me my first name, as if I were an idiot who couldn't remember how to pronounce it. Mort is death in French, Henry Franklin explained in the schoolyard when we were 10 and smirked when he said it. I walloped him good. But secretly I was proud that unlike the Henrys, Joes, and Jacks, my name meant something in the scheme of things. Actually, I'm neither a pessimist nor an optimist. I just envision the cleanup for the birthday party before we order the cake, and the stacks of dirty dishes before we set the table. I'm not arguing here in my defense, but it's a little disconcerting that when a friend calls, "Hey, Mort," and I turn, his face is falling inward, and he is being whisked backward into the eternal darkness before I can say hello. Now, when someone calls a greeting, I shrug and mutter, "Goodbye," before I turn to see who it is. I don't want to make too much of this. Let's leave it at me being just like you with my aches and complaints. But as for things turning out for the best, or you having a good day, I wouldn't count on it. Since we're sort of talking about my name and beginnings, a lot of this book has to do with history and myth. In fact, the book is in 5 sections. The first section is called Beginnings. Isn't that original? And it deals with stories from history and from mythology. And then the second is called At Home and deals with my birth or the birth of some people, and goes right up in an interlocking way to marriage, divorce, meditations at home. Moves in the third section into On Streets and Roads, in which I interact, or many voices interact with different people. Then travels in other countries, some of them made up. And finally, Endings, which is a time of death. This is a life, but it is also the life of the universe. And the very first poem actually is the beginning of time, and the last, in many ways, is the end of time. So, One of the moods is, to get this mythological sense, is this poem called The Girl Who Became My Grandmother. Every night after the household was asleep, the girl who became my grandmother rode her stove through the forests of Lithuania. She would return by dawn, her black hair gleaming with droplets of dew and her burlap sack filled with fog-webbed mushrooms and roots. "It's true," my grandfather said. "At first I followed, but I could never keep up." He would hear the clanging and rusty squeakings fade into the trees, and with a sigh, he would go home. He accepted the situation until the night she left in the kitchen, as if she rode in a coach pulled by horses of black wind. Grandfather followed in the rest of the house, standing in the doorway to the now departed room, bellowing threats as if urging the house forward at greater speed. He caught her outside Vilna when she stopped to get her bearings, and the house slammed into the stalled kitchen, grandfather tumbling through the doorway and hitting his head on the leg of the table. "And where do you think you're going this time, lady?" he groaned from the floor, rubbing his right ear. The girl smiled down at him and, kneeling by his side, stroked his hair, but didn't say anything. That was the last time the girl who became my grandmother went on a nocturnal outing. Soon after, they left for America. In Brooklyn, she rode from one day to the next in the house my grandfather built around her, watching the changing scene beyond the kitchen window. It was then she became my grandmother, white-haired and smiling, never saying much of anything, even when the old man shouted from the other rooms. Not that he ever needed anything. He just wanted to be sure she was still there.
Prose poetry differs from verse poetry in that it doesn't recognize the line. It really is written in prose paragraphs. I have found that by writing in closed verse, that is meters and forms with rhymes, first, that you're inhibited from really finding your own expression. I had written in those forms before, and then I started to write in free verse. Then years later, I began to realize that even the lines in free verse were holding me in a kind of prison, a tyranny, shackled. And so what I did was, by moving out of the line and not worrying about how I got from one line to another, suddenly I had a freedom of expression I never really knew was there. And so it has just become a totally new way of speaking to me, and a new way, and this is the thing, of talking and imagining. It makes your mind work on a totally different level in a totally different way. So that's the freedom I found in writing the prose poem. That doesn't mean I'm still not writing verse poems. I am. But they sound very, very much different than my prose poems.
The request. Suddenly, Björling's voice on the stereo. "As a request, I should like to sing for you Schubert's Serenade." The crowd applauds, and with a cascade of piano music framing the lyrics, he sings. But my tears had started, hot, unexpected, at hearing his words, for I was aware that the man making this announcement on the stage of Carnegie Hall in 1958, his voice clipped and formal with a foreign intonation, would be dead within 2 years. Who made the request, and what motivated it? A shared melody with a loved one in a long-ago Vienna or Shanghai? The memory of an age moldering behind closed doors where the faces of Baroque cherubs and the tiles of upswept Chinese roofs were cracked and broken long before they were the wreckage of cities under siege, long before millions of arms and legs twitched in mass graves? Or maybe not that. Maybe the singer, thick-chested, square-faced, having witnessed wars and depredations, was requesting permission to sing one more song for everything that was gone. Whatever the reason, after the applause and encased in the piano's melody, the voice streaked through the hall, entered the recording apparatus, and now cleaves the heated air in my living room years later, rolling back the present on two sides to make way for its arrival from the past. like a deluge of sunlight tumbling through an opening in the clouds to the valley below, letting us glimpse for a moment a possibility of redemption in a tumult of wings. But what's this? The voice unexpectedly summons up the image of my father in the photograph I'd long forgotten. He poses from the waist up in a business suit, his right arm extended as if delivering an aria, and I realize that he looked enough like this tenor I've idolized for years to be his brother. The same stocky build and beefy features, and the words I'm hearing now are coming not from the tenor's lips, but from my father's half-remembered face. That face I'd seen only twice, and then for barely several minutes, and whose only words I can remember, "So, you're my son," expressed neither approval nor disapproval, just an affirmation that I existed, a statement made not for me, but for himself. But now, Father, your voice is so clear. Sing to me the old songs of love and loss and continuing on. Let your voice soothe me, an old man myself now, older than you ever were, but more in need of a lullaby on this battered earth than I ever was as a child. Sing from the past about what seems irrevocably gone, but always returns. So once again, I can believe in the guiding presence of fathers and the healing power of song. Thank you, Dad. Let's bring us here to Santa Cruz. We all know the place I'm going to be talking about in this poem, The Letter. I found the letter in a book I bought at an outdoor theater turned flea market every weekend. It was June 1995 in a small town on the California coast. The book was Tolstoy, Anna Karenina, and the letter was tucked between pages 434 and 435, where a delirious Levin, the day after he's proposed to Kitty, visits her parents' home. The letter, pinkish, sealed, not mailed, faintly redolent of talcum, like a pressed flower, was from a Sarah Harris, dated inside October 1939. No, yes, I opened it and read how fine the trip was from Des Moines back to Cincinnati. Suspecting nuances and unworded passages I had no way of understanding that went along with what I took to be the mute appeal to Carl Bigelow, 913 McKinley Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa, in the final paragraph. There didn't seem time for me to say all the things I needed to. Do you feel the same? The Tolstoy was a book club's bonus edition, bound in gray leatherette. Had Sarah Harris purposely placed the letter there between those pages depicting Levin and Kitty's jubilant betrothal? I had no way of knowing, and refused to suppose. However, I resealed the letter, affixed fresh stamps to the envelope, and sent it on. Some quick ones. This will go by very quick. There we go. It's another letter poem. And I love this. There's some poems that are just there, and all you got to do is just put down what happened, and get rid of all the extraneous bull. And the title of it is the first several words of the poem. It's I Find the Letter. I find the letter in a drawer, still sealed, postmarked 5 years ago. A letter that, when opened, shrieks for help, but silently, like a hand above the waves, clutching air. I've seen him a number of times since he wrote it, but never once in word or gesture has he referred to it. I call him 3 minutes later. Remarried, no longer a drunk, he says, "Your refusal to answer made me see how foolish I was and caused me to change my life."
no matter what I write about everything in the world, from love to children to war to horror to prejudice, and those are all abstractions. And I don't write abstractly; I write concretely about all aspects of existence, because that's really what all the art should do. They should address every part of human existence and never limit themselves to anything. The kind of poetry I write, whether it be prose poems or verse poems or even close verse poems, are dictated by the content. In other words, it almost happens automatically that my expression chooses the kind of form it's going to be in. It's a very mysterious thing, and I just let it happen. I don't even question it.
People do not like this poem. And that really fascinates me all the more, and I think it will fascinate you too. I said to my friend Al Young, who you heard the quote from, should I put this in the book? It's not really a poem. And he said, it's got to be put anywhere there's print. So I listened to Al. There's an old saying, which is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a biblical thing. But New York hustlers have another phrase. It's called doing it to others. And that is the name of this poem. In Croatia, where I've just been, the Serbs really did it to the poor Croatian farmers, my truly wonderful in-laws. But every moment I was there, I was aware that the Croats had done it to the Serbs, Jews, and Gypsies 5 decades before. And the Jews did it to the Palestinians afterwards. And the Gypsies are doing it to everyone, and everyone is doing it to everyone else. And I wondered where that left me. On one hand, a poet singing about the joys of being human and alive, and on the other, the child of immigrants who, like everyone else, distrusted, feared, or hated anyone not like themselves. I know whoever I am is carrying my ancestors' distrust and hatreds wherever I go, as well as their longings for an end to suffering and injustice. And as a poet, I am expressing both the hatreds and the longings from a deep place, or rather, my ancestors and my people, dispossessed or dispossessing, are speaking them through me, as yours are through you. And we have little choice but to let them do so, even though we know that whoever our people are, they'll probably do bad things to others when they get the chance. But I still believe that when we get that chance, you and I can change everything. For then our people's hatreds will be as much our personal possessions as they ever will, together with the longings for an end to injustice and victimization. And we can choose to merge the hatreds with the longings so they will become reminders that whoever we were once the sufferers and should now remember that, and open our fists and reach out our fingers to others as if our fingers were magic wands that can transform the world. Thank you. I hope the whole world thanks you, not me. I'm just going to read one of these poems that deal with war and everything like this. And I have been traveling in the Balkans the last several years, and this poem is really written about that. But again, things are timely but timeless, I hope. I mean, I don't mean to say that, I'm timeless. I'm the great unacknowledged, the unacknowledged legislator of mankind. That was Shelley, not me. I'm just a Brooklyn boy. But what is going on tonight as we sit here in other parts of the world, and certainly one part of the world? Let me just read one more of these poems. This is for Mr. Sharon. The Tale of a Doorknob. A lieutenant salutes his major, nods to an enlisted man who triggers a heavy artillery piece. 5 miles away, a child hugging a rag doll closes an apartment door behind her. As the door, apartment, whole building collapses before she can remove her hand from the knob. She will be found that way, in the rubble, gripping the round piece of metal she had turned in the door countless times on the morning she went out to play or run to the store for her mother. Overcast mornings, sunny mornings, mornings filled with rain. The soldiers will wonder at the little girl without a face who lies 10 feet away from the remains of a rag doll, still holding a round metal object that looks like a doorknob. Several of them will stare. Several others will turn away or throw up or curse the hills, the enemy, the war, even the perfidy of humankind. Invaders or defenders, their actions will be the same. Only 2 or 3, a general, a sergeant, a private, will be struck by the thought that the girl is holding what could be a globe of the world or some other symbolic shape. And one of them will gently, or not so gently, pry her fingers open to retrieve the object and bring it home to his children as a souvenir, accompanying the gift with tales of conquest in a foreign country, or with instructions for merciless vengeance in his own land.
There are a lot of people, especially young people, who think that art is the most important thing in life. Well, they've got it wrong. Life is the most important thing. Your work reflects life. You don't go out and look for things to write about. Things are there. And what you're doing is you're living them, you're commenting on them, you're experiencing them. And some of them make their way into poetry. Hopefully, if the more you write, the more you're really consumed with having to write, the more things you write about. And I would hope that would be the case. But life is always the most important thing. And if you ask me to make a choice between life or art, there's no hesitation, it's life.
This incident happened, and here is my encounter with the internal mystery. I encountered the internal mystery once. It was on a spring night in Zagreb several years ago, in the unlighted hallway of a musty walk-up where I'd gone to visit the acquaintance of a friend. A narrow hallway where the odors of vinegar and coal gas had settled permanently in the darkness. I hadn't taken 10 steps into that darkness when I became aware of a hulking presence facing me from the depths of the hall. Excuse me, I said automatically to the figure and waited for a reply, my body tense, poised for whatever might happen. The figure didn't answer. Excuse me, I repeated, a quaver in my voice this time. Again, there was no reply. I held my breath and listened, my heartbeat resounding now from the walls, but I heard nothing, and it was so dark I couldn't find the number of the apartment door I was looking for as a possible escape. Excuse me? I said again, taking a tentative step forward. But whoever or whatever was in that hall with me remained silent, advancing toward me with each step I took toward it. I stopped and listened again, straining to see that other figure, and when I resumed my steps, my nerves were so jangled I didn't know whether I was advancing farther into the hall or returning the way I had come. I stopped again and stood with the darkness surrounding me and listened to my breathing, hoping to hear the breathing of the other, but there was only the darkness pressing in on me as if someone had flung a heavy cloak around my soul. I began to tremble. Excuse me? I said for the 4th time, the words sounding more like a prayer than the apologies of an intruder or a clumsy tourist. What else could I have done? Drop to my knees like a child at the side of a bed and, with hands joined, breathlessly ask a being who lives in the dark to protect Mommy and Daddy, and especially me, from the scaly, fire-eyed creature who at that moment I may have been praying to? No. That idea alone made me firm my stance, even though I was still trembling, sweat smearing my body as if I'd been anointed. I said, excuse me, I repeated once again, but this time louder, with a twinge of annoyance in my voice at not being answered, and the defiance in my tone unexpectedly thrilled me. The breath seethed from between my clenched teeth. Simultaneously, I heard, or thought I heard, a muffled snort or growl. It was a gagging sound, a struggle for breath that mimicked my own and, almost instantly, dissolved my annoyance. So clear was its desire to communicate, and so clear was its inability to do so, as if its words were trapped inside a muzzled snout. Understand, the entire incident had taken no more than several moments, and as I strained to interpret the gasping of that other, I had the strongest impression yet that someone stood facing me. At that instant, a blade of light sliced through the dark from a wrenched-open door, and a silhouetted figure bellowed in Croatian, "What's all the noise? What do you want?" The light gave me my bearings, and without a word, I turned and ran from the building. When I returned the next morning, I was surprised to find how short the hallway was. In the gray daylight, I could see a staircase to my left, and set against the wall beneath it, a narrow table topped with envelopes and circulars and a small vase with wilted flowers. There was no other furniture, except a full-length mirror beyond the table at the end of the corridor, placed there, I assumed, to make the hall look longer. I watched myself advancing toward it, an anonymous figure with a light at its back, looming larger with each step, and I murmured almost involuntarily, "I am who I am." And finally, blinking. I leave you with this. And thank you again so much for coming. I really appreciate your all being here. You've got to love life so much that you don't want to miss a moment of it, and pay such close attention to whatever you're doing that each time you blink, you can hear your eyelashes applauding what you've just seen. In each eye, there are more than 80 eyelashes, 40 above and 40 below, like 40 pairs of arms working, 80 pairs in both eyes, a whole audience clapping so loud you can hardly bear to listen. 160 hands batter each other every time you blink. Bravo, they call. Encore, encore. Paralyzed in a hospital bed or watching the cold rain from under a bridge, remember this.